Tonight, we're not here to fix anything, not to understand everything, not to become someone better before you're allowed to rest. This is a quiet space where we gently let go and return to inner peace through soft Zen stories inspired by the Buddha, shared slowly so your mind can soften and your body can rest. Maybe today asked a little too much from you. Too many thoughts, too many worries, too many small things you tried to hold together. And maybe, just for this moment, you're ready to set them down. Here, you don't need to improve yourself. You don't need to solve tomorrow. You are already enough simply by being here, breathing quietly. Just for a moment. Where are you listening from tonight? Wherever you are, I'm grateful you're here, sharing this quiet space. Let your breath slow as if it remembers the way home. Let your shoulders soften like they no longer need to carry the world. Tonight, we'll listen to a simple story. A story from ordinary life, carrying a small thread of Zen and Buddhist wisdom. Not to give you more to think about, but to help you loosen your grip. Because suffering rarely ends by force. It softens when we stop holding it so tightly. There's nothing to rush, nothing to achieve, only a gentle drifting into rest, into stillness. Whether you stay awake or slowly fall asleep, this moment is already enough. And now, we begin tonight's journey with these Zen stories. Sophia stayed longer than she needed to. The classroom was empty, the hallway lights outside already dimmed to their evening setting. Most of the building had that after-hours quiet. No footsteps, no kids' voices, just the faint hum of the air conditioning and the occasional click from somewhere down the hall as the building settled. She stood by her desk with her tote bag still on her shoulder, staring at the whiteboard like it might tell her what to do with the feeling that had been following her all day. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even loud anger. It was disappointment. The kind that sits behind your ribs and makes everything feel heavier than it should. Sophia was 30, an elementary school teacher, and she had learned how to keep her face calm even when her heart felt bruised. A classroom demanded steadiness. Kids could sense it the way animals sense weather. If she carried too much tension, they carried it too. So she smiled when she had to. She kept her voice warm. She did the lesson. She cleaned the glue sticks off the tables. She reminded a kid for the 4th time to stop chewing on the eraser. She managed. But in the quiet, when the room finally belonged to no one, the feeling returned with more clarity. It started with a message. Just one line on her phone earlier that morning. A parent email, polite on the surface, sharp underneath. The kind of message that reads like concern, but feels like accusation. It wasn't the first time. But today it landed differently. Sophia had stared at her screen in the teacher's lounge, coffee in hand, and felt something heat up in her chest. Not because the parent was entirely wrong, not because she was guilty, but because she was tired of being doubted by people who didn't see the whole day. She typed a response 3 times, deleted it 3 times. Finally, she wrote something short and professional and careful, the kind of email that takes all the emotion out of your body and turns it into safe sentences. Then she went on with her day, like nothing happened. Now, standing in the empty classroom, she could feel the leftover heat in her throat. The words she didn't say. The urge to defend herself. The urge to be seen. She walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. The sky was a pale gray blue, clouded over in a way that didn't look like rain, but didn't look like clear weather either. The sun wasn't visible. Still, the light was there, spread out, muted, filling everything without a direct source. Sophia remembered something her grandmother used to say when she was a kid. The sun is always there. Clouds just cover it for a while. Back then, Sophia thought it was just about weather. Now she understood it as something else too. When she was angry at someone, the anger became the only thing she could see. It colored the entire person. It turned one moment into a full identity. One email into a whole story. They don't respect me. They think I'm careless. They're looking for a reason to blame me. And maybe there was some truth in that. Or maybe it was just the cloud doing what clouds do, blocking the sun, making the world feel darker than it actually was. Sophia turned back toward her desk. Her hands moved without thinking. She straightened a stack of worksheets, aligned the corners, put a marker back in its tray. Small actions, tidy actions. Actions that made sense when the mind didn't. She tried to be honest with herself softly. She wasn't only angry at the parent, she was angry at the whole system that made teachers feel like they were always on trial. The endless pressure to prove you're doing enough. The way a single complaint could make you question months of effort. And under that anger was something even quieter fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being good enough, fear that one day someone would be right. Sophia sat down in her chair and let her tote bag slide to the floor. The strap made a small thump against the desk leg. She exhaled long and slow, like her body had been waiting for permission to do that all day. She thought about the parent again, about the kid actually. The kid who had smiled at her during reading time. The kid who brought her a dandelion from the playground and said it was for luck. The kid who sometimes came to school a little too hungry, a little too quiet. Sophia didn't know what was happening at home. She didn't know what kind of day the parent had. She only knew what the email had sounded like. And the email had made a cloud that was now sitting in her chest. She didn't need to excuse it. She didn't need to pretend it was fine. She just needed to remember something important. A cloud is not the sky. A cloud is not the sun. A cloud is a passing thing. Sophia reached for the light switch near the door and clicked off one row of fluorescent lights. The room dimmed slightly. She clicked off another. The hum softened. The classroom became gentler, less sharp around the edges. In the lower light, the whiteboard looked less demanding. The desks looked more like quiet furniture than stations of responsibility. The whole room felt like it was exhaling with her. Sophia stood by the door for a moment, hand on the switch, and let the last bit of heat in her body settle. The email would still be there tomorrow. The story would still be there if she wanted to pick it up again. But tonight she didn't want to carry it home. Not the cloud, not the storm she could make out of it. She turned off the final lights, locked the classroom, and stepped into the hallway where the building felt cool and calm. The sun, she reminded herself as she walked, hadn't gone anywhere. It was just behind something for a while. Sophia didn't check her phone on the drive home. It sat face down in the cup holder, silent dark. She noticed the urge to reach for it anyway, just to see if anything else had come in. Just to confirm the story hadn't changed. She let the urge pass. The road ahead was familiar streetlights, spaced evenly, each one appearing and disappearing at a steady pace. Her shoulders dropped a little as she drove. At home, she left her shoes by the door and didn't turn on the overhead lights. A small lamp in the living room was enough. The apartment felt still in that end-of-day way, like it had been waiting patiently for her to arrive and stop moving. She poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window while she drank. Outside, the sky had darkened completely now. The clouds were still there, she could tell, but they'd blended into the night. Nothing dramatic. Just layers of gray moving slowly, doing what they do. Anger has a habit of overstating its case. It takes a moment and stretches it into a verdict. It takes one interaction and uses it to explain an entire person. Sophia could feel how easily she'd slipped into that earlier, how the email had begun to stand in for the parent, for the relationship, for the whole year. But now, with the day at a distance, the feeling had changed shape. It wasn't gone. It just wasn't loud. She sat on the couch and let herself sink into the cushion. Her body felt tired in a clean way, the kind that comes after holding a lot and finally setting some of it down. She rested her hands on her lap and noticed how warm they were, how steady. The image returned to her, not the email, not the words, but the sky from earlier. The way the light had still filled everything, even without a visible sun. She thought about the parent again, but differently this time. Not as an antagonist, not as a character in a story, just as a person likely tired in their own way, worried in the way parents often are, when they don't know how else to be. This didn't make the email okay. It didn't erase the sting, but it softened the edges. Forgiveness, Sophia realized, didn't have to be a feeling she summoned. It didn't have to be warm or generous or complete. It could be as simple as refusing to let one cloud decide the weather forever. She wasn't forgiving the behavior. She was forgiving the moment, its power. Later, as she got ready for bed, Sophia caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face looked calmer than it had that morning. Not happier, just less tight. She brushed her teeth slowly, unhurried, watching the familiar movements. When she lay down, the apartment made its quiet nighttime sounds, the faint hum of the fridge, the soft creak of the building settling. She pulled the blanket up and exhaled long and even. The email drifted through her mind once more, lighter now, like a thought passing through open air. She didn't follow it. She didn't push it away. She let it move on its own. Somewhere between one breath and the next, she understood something simple and steady. People are not their worst moments, and neither are we. Anger can make it feel otherwise. It can convince you that what you're seeing is the whole truth. But anger, like weather, changes. It moves. It thins. The sun doesn't need defending. It doesn't need arguing. It just waits. Sophia's breathing slowed as the room grew darker. The day loosened its hold. Tomorrow would come with its own clouds, its own light. She didn't need to solve any of that now, for tonight it was enough to rest in the knowing that clarity returns on its own when we stop staring at the sky and demanding it be different. Some things pass best when they're allowed to. Fear doesn't always show up as panic. Sometimes it shows up as distance, a mind that keeps leaning forward, imagining everything that could go wrong, everything that hasn't happened yet. Your body might be standing still, but your thoughts are already far ahead, scanning the future, like it's a cliff you're about to fall from. Tyler learned this slowly. He was 34, a park ranger in a mountain region where people often came looking for quiet, but didn't always know what to do with it once they found it. That night, he was alone in the small ranger cabin, the kind with thick wooden walls and a single window facing the dark slope of the mountain. The wind moved through the trees outside, low and steady, not loud enough to be dramatic, just present. Tyler wasn't afraid of the mountain itself. He'd hiked it in every season. He knew the trails, the loose rocks, the places where snow stayed longer than expected. What unsettled him wasn't the terrain, it was the stretch of unknown ahead of him. A transfer request he hadn't answered yet, a relationship that felt like it was quietly changing shape. A future that didn't look dangerous, but didn't look clear either. He sat at the small table, boots still on, jacket unzipped. His headlamp rested beside his hand. He picked it up, turned it on, and pointed it toward the floor. The beam cut a clean circle of light over the wooden boards. Everything beyond that circle stayed dark. Tyler noticed something he'd known for years, but had forgotten to apply to himself. When you're climbing in the dark, you don't look down the mountain. You don't look for the summit either. You look for the next place to put your foot. That's it. One step, then another. Fear has a way of convincing you to look everywhere except where you are. His thoughts kept pulling him forward. What if this choice closes the wrong door? What if I regret it? What if I don't see the danger coming? Each question widened the imagined drop in front of him. The future became a vast space with no edges, no markers, no handholds. Tyler exhaled slowly and brought the light back down to the floor. The wood grain, a scratch near the leg of the chair, dust that would need to be swept in the morning. Ordinary things, solid things, the kind of details that don't disappear when you're afraid. Outside, the wind shifted. A branch tapped lightly against the cabin wall, then went still again. The mountain wasn't rushing him. The night wasn't demanding answers. He remembered his first winter climb years ago, how his instructor had stopped him mid-trail when Tyler froze, staring down a steep slope. "Don't argue with the height," the man had said quietly. "Just place your foot." Back then, it hadn't felt like wisdom. It had felt like survival. Now, sitting alone in the cabin, Tyler understood it differently. Fear wasn't asking him to solve his life. It was just asking for attention. And attention didn't mean obedience. He stood up, took a few steps toward the door, then paused. His hand rested on the handle. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He just needed to feel the weight of his body balanced upright here. There was something grounding about realizing that even if the path ahead changed, this step, this moment, was stable. The floor held him. The walls held the warmth. The night held everything else without explanation. Tyler turned off the headlamp and let the darkness return. It didn't feel threatening now. It felt wide, like a space that didn't need to be filled. Fear often imagines the worst possible version of tomorrow. But tomorrow never arrives all at once. It comes as moments, steps, small decisions made with the information you have, not the information you wish you had. Tyler sat back down. He unlaced his boots slowly, listening to the soft rasp of fabric and metal. When he finished, he lined them up by the door, neat but not perfect. He didn't check his phone. He didn't rehearse conversations that hadn't happened yet. He let the mountain be what it was, something large, something steady, something that didn't need him to conquer it tonight. Sometimes peace doesn't come from feeling brave. It comes from remembering that you're not required to see the whole path, only the ground beneath you. The wind outside softened. The cabin settled into its quiet creaks and pauses. Tyler leaned back in his chair and allowed his gaze to rest on nothing in particular. The next step could wait. For now, this one was enough. Later that night, the cabin grew quieter in a way Tyler could feel rather than hear. The wind didn't stop, it just became part of the background, like a low breath moving through the trees. The kind of sound you don't need to follow. The kind that keeps going whether you pay attention or not. Tyler lay back on the narrow bed near the wall. He didn't turn off the small lamp right away. Its light was soft, barely reaching the corners of the room, leaving most things in shadow. The ceiling above him was simple wood. Nothing to figure out, nothing to interpret. His mind tried once or twice to wander ahead again, to the transfer request, to the future version of himself that might look back and judge this moment. But the thoughts didn't have the same grip. They arrived without urgency, then drifted off when nothing responded. He brought his attention to his body instead. The way the mattress supported his weight, the way his shoulders sank slightly once he stopped holding them up, the quiet rhythm of his breath already slower than before. In the mountains, Tyler knew panic often came from looking too far. People slipped not because the ground disappeared, but because their attention did. They leaned forward before their footing was secure. Fear works the same way in the mind. Tyler let that idea pass without holding on to it. He didn't need to turn it into ideas. He'd learned enough to know that understanding something didn't always mean doing something with it. Outside, a distant animal call echoed once, then faded. It didn't trigger alarm. It was just another reminder that the night had its own movements, its own language, one that didn't ask for interpretation. Tyler reached over and turned off the lamp. Darkness filled the room, but not completely. There was still a thin outline of the window, a faint suggestion of trees beyond it. Enough to orient himself, enough to feel safe. He remembered how on night climbs, experienced climbers trusted their lights not to show the whole route, but to show enough. Enough rock, enough ground, Enough information to take the next step without guessing. That was all the light was ever meant to do. Fear often demands certainty. It wants guarantees, full maps, complete explanations. But the body doesn't need all that to rest. The body only needs to know that right now, it's not falling. Tyler placed one hand on his chest, the other resting loosely at his side. His fingers were relaxed, not curled into fists. His breath moved in and out without effort, without correction. The mountain didn't ask him to decide anything tonight. The future didn't ask him to arrive early. There was a quiet relief in realizing that uncertainty wasn't a threat. It was simply space. Space where things hadn't formed yet. Space that didn't need to be filled with fear. Tyler's thoughts grew less specific. They lost their sharp edges, becoming more like impressions than sentences. The idea of tomorrow softened. The need to resolve anything faded into the background. He didn't tell himself to sleep. He didn't tell himself to relax. He just stayed with the steady feeling of being held by the bed. Stayed with the sound of wind passing through branches. Stayed with the simple fact of being here now, without needing to move. At some point, the distinction between listening and drifting began to blur. His awareness widened, then thinned like a beam of light slowly dimming. The path ahead would still be there in the morning. The choices would still wait. For now there was no cliff, only solid ground beneath him, only one step already taken, and that was enough to let the night carry the rest. By the time Rachel reached the parking lot, the rain had already decided what kind of night it was going to be. Not a storm, not anything dramatic, just steady rain falling straight down, soaking everything without asking permission. She paused beside her car keys, still in her hand, watching water slide across the windshield in thin, uneven lines. Her jacket was already damp at the shoulders. She could feel the cold beginning to seep in, the kind that doesn't shock you, just slowly settles. Rachel was 39, a single mom, an office administrator who spent most of her day holding things together quietly. Schedules, requests, small crises that weren't hers but somehow landed on her desk anyway. By the time she clocked out, she felt emptied out in a way that sleep alone didn't always fix. She opened the car door and sat down, closing it with a dull, heavy sound. The rain drummed softly on the roof, not loud, not gentle, just constant. For a moment, she didn't start the engine. She rested her forehead lightly against the steering wheel, eyes open, watching the wipers drag water aside only for it to return again. Clear, blurred, clear, blurred. That's what the day had felt like. Her mind replayed the small things. A missed call from her son's school, a comment from her supervisor that wasn't criticism but wasn't reassurance either. A to-do list that kept rearranging itself no matter how many boxes she checked. None of it was unbearable. All of it together felt heavy. Rachel sighed and leaned back into the seat. The rain didn't stop. It didn't respond to her mood. It didn't speed up or slow down because she needed a break. And oddly, that helped. Rain had a way of doing that, reminding her that not everything was reacting to her effort. Some things were simply happening whether she managed them or not. She turned the key. The engine came to life with a low hum. The heater kicked in slowly, air still cool at first. She reached up and wiped a small circle on the windshield with her sleeve, then stopped. The glass fogged again almost immediately. No point fighting it. Rachel let the wipers do their steady work. Back and forth, back and forth. Each pass cleared the view just enough to see the painted lines on the asphalt shining faintly under the lot lights. Driving home in the rain always made time stretch. Traffic slowed. Everyone moved more carefully. There was less urgency in the air, as if the world itself had decided to ease up. As she pulled out of the lot, Rachel noticed how the rain softened the edges of everything. Streetlights blurred into warm halos. Brake lights smeared into red reflections on the road. The usual sharpness of the city faded. She didn't have to see far ahead, just the car in front of her, just the curve of the road. Fear often showed up for Rachel like this, not as terror, but as accumulation, a sense that if she wasn't careful, something would slip. Something would go wrong. Someone would need her, and she'd be one step behind. But the rain didn't ask her to hurry. It soaked the road evenly, washing dust into the gutters, dulling the sharpness of the day. She remembered standing in rain as a kid, hating the wet clothes, loving the smell afterward. The way everything felt quieter once the rain passed. Rachel loosened her grip on the steering wheel. She hadn't noticed how tight it was until her hands relaxed. The car moved steadily forward. No skidding, no drama, just motion. The rain didn't fix anything. It didn't solve her problems. It didn't rearrange her responsibilities. But it changed the texture of the moment. And sometimes that was enough. She turned onto her street windshield wipers, still keeping rhythm, and felt a small, unfamiliar sense of relief. Not because things were suddenly better, but because she wasn't fighting the weather anymore. The rain could fall. The road could be wet. Her day could be heavy, and she could still make it home. By the time Rachel pulled into her driveway, the rain had softened into something quieter. It still fell, but more patiently now, as if it had said what it needed to say and was content to keep going without attention. She turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the ticking sound of cooling metal. The rain tapping gently on the windshield. The house in front of her looked dim and familiar. One porch light glowing like it always did. Nothing about it promised answers. It just promised shelter. Rachel stepped out of the car and felt the wet ground beneath her shoes. The air smelled clean in a way it hadn't earlier, washed of dust and heat. She didn't rush. If her jacket got wetter, that was fine. It wasn't something she needed to fix right now. Inside, she kicked off her shoes by the door and hung her jacket on the back of a chair. A small puddle formed on the floor beneath it. She noticed it, then decided to leave it for later. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, just paused. She moved through the living room, turning on a lamp instead of the overhead light. The softer glow made the space feel gentler, as if the day had loosened its grip the moment she walked in. She filled a glass with water, took a slow sip, then another. Rain had a way of doing this, not erasing what came before, but rinsing it. Letting the sharp edges dull, letting things settle where they landed instead of scattering them further. Rachel sat down on the couch and leaned back, listening to the distant sound of rain through the walls. It was muffled now, almost like a memory of sound rather than the thing itself. Her shoulders dropped a little, then a little more. The worries from earlier didn't disappear. They were still there somewhere. Tomorrow would still come with its questions. Her responsibilities hadn't changed shape just because it rained. But the fear that usually wrapped itself tightly around those thoughts had loosened. She noticed how fear often tried to rush her, to solve, to plan, to imagine outcomes before they arrived. It liked to stay ahead of time, as if being prepared meant being safe. But tonight, the rain had slowed everything down enough that rushing felt unnecessary. The future could wait outside like the rain itself. Present, but not pressing. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment. Not to escape, just to rest them. Her breath found its own rhythm, longer on the exhale, quieter on the inhale. She didn't adjust it. She didn't guide it. She let it be what it was. There was a strange comfort in realizing that change didn't always announce itself dramatically. Sometimes it came like rain, inconvenient, unwelcome, unavoidable, and then quietly did its work. The road outside had been dusty before. Tires kicked up grit. Wind carried it everywhere. Now it lay darker, smoother, easier to drive on. The rain hadn't asked whether the dust wanted to leave. It just passed through. Rachel opened her eyes and looked around the room again. Everything was still where she left it. The couch, the lamp, the faint reflection in the window. But something inside her had shifted just enough to notice. She stood up, turned off the lamp, and let the room return to shadow. The house didn't need to be perfectly dry. The day didn't need to be perfectly understood. In the bedroom, she lay down without checking her phone, without rehearsing conversations or scanning tomorrow's list. The rain outside continued steady and unbothered. If fear was imagination reaching too far ahead, then peace, she realized, might be this, allowing the moment to be exactly what it was, without adding more weight to it. The rain would stop when it stopped. The road would dry when it dried. Tomorrow would arrive when it arrived. For now, there was nothing she needed to outrun, nothing she needed to solve. Just the quiet work of letting the day be washed clean enough to rest. And as the rain carried the last of the dust away, Rachel let the night carry the rest. The leaf had been there longer than Susan expected. It clung to the bare branch outside her window long after the others had let go. Day after day, the tree stood almost empty, its limbs thin against the sky, while that one leaf remained brown at the edges, curled inward, still attached. Susan noticed it one quiet afternoon when she sat by the window with a book she wasn't really reading. The light was soft, the kind that only comes late in the season. Not warm, not cold, just tired. She was 62 now, a librarian for most of her life. Someone who had learned to love slow things, pages turning shelves, settling the low hum of a building holding its breath. Change had never frightened her loudly. It arrived for her in subtler ways. Retirements, empty desks, names that stopped appearing on holiday cards. The leaf didn't move much. Even when the wind came through it, only trembled slightly, as if unsure whether it was ready. Susan found herself watching it longer than she meant to, wondering what kept it there. She told herself it was just biology. A stronger stem, a sheltered angle. Nothing poetic about it. And yet, she kept looking. Later that evening, she stepped out onto the porch, wrapping a cardigan around her shoulders. The air smelled like damp earth and old wood. Somewhere nearby, crickets began their steady rhythm, not loud, not shy. The tree stood just a few steps from the porch railing. Up close, the leaf looked thinner than she'd imagined. Fragile, almost translucent where the light passed through. Susan reached out not to touch it, but to steady herself against the railing. She remembered autumns from years ago when her husband would rake leaves into uneven piles and complain about how they never stayed where he put them. She smiled faintly at the memory, then felt the familiar tightening in her chest that came when a thought didn't have anywhere to land. Loss didn't always arrive as a sharp event. Sometimes it lingered like this leaf refusing to fall when everything else already had. Susan had learned to live alongside that kind of absence. The quiet seat at the table. The extra mug she no longer needed. The way evenings stretched longer now. She didn't push the feeling away. She let it rest the same way she let the night settle around her. The leaf rustled once, then stilled again. There was something oddly comforting about it. Not the holding on, but the patience. The leaf wasn't fighting gravity. It wasn't resisting change with effort. It was simply still there for now. Susan thought about all the endings she had feared when she was younger. The ones she imagined would break her. The ones she thought she wouldn't survive. Most of them hadn't come the way she expected. And when they did come, they didn't erase her. They rearranged her life quietly, slowly, until she learned how to stand in the new shape. She sat down on the porch chair, the wood creaking beneath her weight. The sound felt familiar, grounding. She watched her breath fog faintly in the cooler air, then disappear. Impermanence, she knew, wasn't a threat. It was a rhythm. Everything entered, everything left. Even the things that stayed longer than expected eventually followed the same pattern. Still knowing something and feeling ready for it were different things. Susan closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the crickets, the distant sound of a car passing somewhere far away. The night didn't hurry the leaf. It didn't insist on anything. When she opened her eyes again, the leaf was still there. She smiled at that. Not because she needed it to stay forever, but because it was allowed to stay as long as it did. Some endings don't need to be forced. Some beginnings don't announce themselves. Sometimes life simply waits until everything is ready. Susan leaned back, letting the chair support her, letting the quiet do its work. The leaf would fall when it fell, or it wouldn't. Either way, the tree already knew how to grow again. The leaf stayed through the night. Susan noticed it again in the morning light, still holding on, still quiet. Frost traced a thin line along the railing, and the air carried that clean, almost metallic chill that came just before winter settled in. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt unfinished. She made her tea and stood by the window while it steeped, watching the branch sway gently. The leaf moved with it, now less rigid than before, as if it had loosened its grip without letting go entirely. Susan didn't wonder when it would fall anymore. The question had softened into something less sharp. She was more curious about how it stayed present in this in-between moment, not fully alive, not yet gone. That space felt familiar. So much of her life now existed there, between who she had been and who she was becoming. Between the roles she once filled and the quieter ones she was learning to accept. Between holding and releasing. She carried her tea out to the porch again, the mug warming her hands. The chair creaked in the same place as the night before. The sound reassured her that some things at least were consistent. The leaf trembled once in a breeze that barely deserved the name. It turned slightly, catching the light. For a second, its veins glowed faintly like a map no one needed to read anymore. Susan felt no urgency rise in her chest. No need to intervene. No need to wish for anything to happen faster. Loss had taught her that endings didn't require her permission. They arrived when they arrived. And beginnings, she had learned, were often too quiet to notice at first. She thought of the library she would leave behind in a few months, the shelves that would still hold their weight, the readers who would come and go without knowing her name. It no longer felt like erasure. It felt like continuity. The leaf shifted again. Then, without ceremony, it let go. There was no sound when it fell, no dramatic motion. It drifted downward in a slow, uneven path, turning once then again before resting on the ground beneath the tree. Susan watched without flinching. Something inside her loosened, not in grief, but in recognition. This was how it happened. This was how it always happened. Not with force, but with timing. She stayed where she was, breathing evenly, allowing the moment to complete itself without adding a story to it. The tree stood bare now, unremarkable, ready for its next quiet season. In a few months, new leaves would appear without asking whether the old ones had been missed. Susan finished her tea. The warmth spread through her chest, steady and kind. She set the mug down and rested her hands in her lap, palms open, fingers relaxed. Change, she realized, didn't mean disappearance. It meant movement. It meant making room. The fallen leaf would return to the earth. The tree would use what remained. Nothing was wasted. She stood up and went back inside, leaving the porch as it was. The day would unfold on its own. There was nothing she needed to carry forward from the night before. Impermanence wasn't a loss of ground. It was the ground itself, always shifting, always supporting the next step. And as the morning light grew a little brighter, Susan felt ready to move with it slowly, without fear, trusting the quiet intelligence of change. Some mornings don't arrive with energy. They arrive quietly, almost shy, like they're not sure if anyone is ready for them yet. Tyler was already awake when the light started to thin the darkness between the trees. He hadn't set an alarm. He rarely did on days like this. As a park ranger, his schedule shifted with the seasons, with weather, with things that didn't care much about clocks. That morning he stood on a narrow trail just before sunrise, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, breath visible for a moment and then gone. The forest was still. Not silent exactly, but waiting. The kind of quiet that feels full rather than empty. Tyler took a few slow steps forward, boots pressing into damp soil. Somewhere above him, a bird began to sing. Just one. A thin, clear sound, unhurried, unafraid of being heard or not heard. It didn't repeat itself for effect. It didn't pause to see if anyone was listening. It simply sang the way it always did because that was what it did when the morning came. Tyler stopped walking. He hadn't meant to. His body just did it on its own. He stood there, head tilted slightly, listening. Another bird joined in, then another, each with its own rhythm, its own tone. None of them tried to match the others. None of them waited for permission. They weren't performing. They weren't proving anything. They weren't hoping for applause. They were just being birds. Tyler felt something loosen in his chest, something he hadn't realized was tight. It wasn't a dramatic release, no wave of emotion, just a subtle shift, like when you unclench your jaw after holding it all night. Lately, he'd been carrying a quiet question around with him, one he didn't talk about much. It showed up when he scrolled through his phone at night, when he heard old friends talk about promotions or big moves or what's next. The question wasn't loud, but it was persistent. Am I doing enough? Enough on paper. His life was fine. Steady job, decent health, a small apartment close to the park. He liked his work. He believed in it. But sometimes, especially in moments of comparison, that didn't seem to count for much. The world was loud about success, about recognition, about being seen. And Tyler wasn't sure where someone like him fit into that noise. Another bird sang closer this time. Tyler smiled, almost without realizing it. Not because the sound was impressive, but because it was honest. The bird wasn't trying to be louder than the rest of the forest. It wasn't trying to stand out. It was simply responding to the morning. Tyler thought about how often he did the opposite. How often he checked to see if what he was doing mattered before he let himself enjoy it. How often he measured his days by reaction instead of by presence. How many times he'd waited for someone else to notice before he allowed himself to feel okay about where he was. The bird didn't wait. It sang again, the same simple phrase, as if nothing else in the world required its attention. Tyler leaned against a nearby tree, the bark cool through his jacket. He closed his eyes for a moment. The forest continued without him. The light shifted. The air moved. Nothing stopped just because he did. There was something oddly comforting about that. He realized that the birds weren't singing for the forest. They were singing from themselves, from whatever instinct or joy or necessity lived inside them. They didn't seem concerned with how their song landed. They didn't adjust their pitch to be more likable. They didn't question whether they deserved to be heard. They sang because singing was part of being alive. Tyler took a slow breath in, then out. The breath felt easier than it had earlier, like it didn't have to pass through as many tight places to get out. He thought about the small things he loved that no one ever clapped for. Early mornings like this, fixing trail signs, watching fog lift off the ground, listening to the woods wake up. None of it earned praise. None of it went online. But it filled something real in him. Maybe value didn't have to be loud. Maybe it didn't have to be proven. Maybe it didn't even have to be witnessed. Another song rose from the trees, then faded naturally without a dramatic ending. No grand finale, just a soft return to quiet. Tyler opened his eyes. The sky was lighter now, not bright yet, but changing. He straightened up, brushed his hands together, and took a step forward on the trail. The birds continued behind him, unconcerned with whether he stayed or went. As he walked, the question that had been following him didn't disappear completely, but it felt less heavy, less demanding, like it didn't need an answer right now. He didn't need to sing louder. He didn't need to wait for approval. He just needed to keep moving through his own morning at his own pace, and somehow that felt like enough for now. Tyler kept walking as the light slowly spread between the trees. The trail curved gently ahead, familiar, but never boring. He'd walked it hundreds of times in different weather, different moods, different versions of himself. It always looked slightly new anyway. The birds were still singing, though, not all at once anymore. One would call out then, another leaving small pockets of quiet in between. The pauses felt just as important as the sound itself. Nothing rushed to fill them. Tyler noticed how his steps had fallen into an easy rhythm. Not forced, not measured, just moving. His shoulders dropped a little more with each breath, as if his body was remembering something it had forgotten during the week. He thought about how often he'd treated his own life like a performance, even when no one was watching. How he'd edited himself internally, adjusting tone and pace, wondering how things looked from the outside. It was exhausting, living as if there were always an audience somewhere beyond the trees. The birds didn't live that way. They didn't ask if the forest approved of their song. They didn't replay it later, wondering if they could have done it better. They didn't compare themselves to the bird 3 branches over. They sang. And when they were done, they stopped. Tyler slowed and sat on a fallen log near the edge of the trail. The wood was cool and slightly damp solid beneath him. He rested his elbows on his knees and let his gaze soften, not focused on anything in particular. The forest continued its quiet work around him. There was something healing about realizing that his worth didn't have to be constantly reaffirmed, that he didn't need to earn the right to exist comfortably in his own life. He could just be here, breathing, listening, taking up space without apology. He hadn't always believed that. Growing up, praise had come with conditions. Do well, be useful, make sense to other people. Over time, he'd learned to translate attention into value silence, into doubt. If no one was responding, maybe he wasn't doing enough. Maybe he needed to try harder. But the forest offered no feedback like that. It didn't reward or withhold. It simply allowed everything to exist in its own way. Tall trees, small birds, quiet mornings, all of it counted. Tyler felt a small smile touch his face again. Not because he'd figured something out, but because he didn't feel the need to figure anything out anymore. The pressure to define himself softened the way fog lifts without being pushed. A bird landed on a nearby branch close enough for Tyler to hear the flutter of wings. It stayed for a moment, then lifted off again. No drama, no attachment, just motion. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the sounds layer over one another, the birds, the wind, his own breathing. Each sound arrived, stayed, and moved on. None of them asked to be held. When he opened his eyes, the morning felt fully present now. Light had reached the forest floor. Colors had returned. Tyler stood brushing dirt from his hands and continued down the trail. As he walked, a thought surfaced, simple and unforced. Maybe I don't need to be seen to be real. It wasn't a declaration, just a quiet noticing. The birds kept singing behind him, not concerned with whether he remembered them later. They weren't building a case for their importance. They were living it moment by moment, without explanation. Tyler reached the point where the trail split. He paused, then chose the left path, the one that dipped slightly before rising again. He didn't analyze the choice. It just felt right. The forest held him as he moved forward. No spotlight, no applause, no judgment. Just the steady presence of something larger where every small voice had its place. By the time the trail opened up near the ranger station, the birds had quieted. The morning had moved on. Tyler felt ready to move with it. He didn't feel suddenly confident or transformed. He didn't feel certain about everything ahead. But he felt settled, like something inside him had found its natural pitch again. Not too loud, not too small, just true to itself. And that he realized was enough. By late afternoon, the porch was already half in shadow. Grace sat on the wooden swing with a thin cardigan pulled around her shoulders. Not because it was cold, but because the day had begun to let go of its warmth. The air carried that quiet feeling that comes just before evening, when nothing urgent is left to do, and the world doesn't expect much from you anymore. The swing moved slightly as she shifted her weight. Not enough to creak loudly, just a soft, familiar motion. Back and forth, back and forth. A rhythm she didn't think about until it was already happening. Across the yard stood the oak tree. It had been there longer than Grace had lived in the house, longer than her children had lived there, longer than most of the things that once felt important. Its trunk was thick and uneven, the bark rough and darkened with age. In the summer, it filled the yard with shade. In the winter, it stood bare and unremarkable, easy to overlook. Grace had noticed recently how people tended to overlook her too. It wasn't dramatic. No one was being cruel. It was quieter than that. Conversations moved around her instead of toward her. New ideas came from younger voices. Invitations arrived less often. When people spoke to her, it was with kindness, but also with a subtle assumption that her most active chapters were already behind her. She told herself it was fine. She had a good life, a steady routine, a job she'd done well for years. But sometimes, usually in moments like this, the thought would surface without warning. Do I still matter in the way I used to? The swing rocked again. Grace rested her hands in her lap and watched the oak tree's branches stretch outward, weight and heavy. Its leaves barely moved even when the breeze picked up. The tree didn't respond to the wind the way smaller trees did. It didn't rush. It didn't flutter. It stayed. She thought about how, When she was younger, she'd believed value came from visibility, from doing more, from being noticed, from having something to show. Back then she was all branches and leaves, busy spreading, reaching outward in every direction. Now much of that had slowed. Her days were quieter, more internal, less impressive from the outside. And part of her wondered if that meant something had been lost. The oak tree didn't seem to worry about that. It didn't try to look younger than it was. It didn't apologize for the thickness of its trunk or the heaviness of its limbs. It didn't chase attention with new growth every season. It simply stood there, rooted deep, holding the ground in a way that younger trees couldn't. Grace leaned back slightly, letting the swing support her weight. The wood pressed firmly against her spine, steady and real. She felt the tiredness in her body, not the sharp kind, but the deep layered kind that comes from years of showing up. The oak tree had rings. She knew that. Layers beneath the bark, each one marking a season of growth. Stress, weather, survival. None of them visible unless the tree was cut open. None of them obvious to someone passing by. And yet those unseen layers were the reason the tree could stand the way it did. Grace exhaled slowly. The thought settled somewhere inside her, not as a conclusion, but as a possibility. Maybe value didn't live in what people could see anymore. Maybe it had moved underground. She looked at her hands. The skin thinner than it used to be, veins more visible. These hands had held children books, grocery bags, grief, joy. They had done their work quietly, without needing to be admired. The swing rocked again, a little wider this time. The evening insects had started their low hum. Grace didn't turn on the porch light. She liked the half-light. It made everything softer, less defined. She thought about the younger version of herself, always reaching, always stretching toward the next thing. That version had been necessary, but it wasn't the only one that mattered. The oak tree had once been young too. Now its strength was not in how far it reached, but in how deeply it held. Grace sat with that image as the sky dimmed further. The yard grew still. The tree didn't move much at all, but somehow it felt more present than anything else around her. She didn't need to decide what this meant yet. She didn't need to turn it into a lesson or a reassurance. It was enough to notice the shift, to feel the weight of something steady beneath the surface. The swing slowed on its own. Grace let it. As the evening deepened, the air around the porch seemed to slow. The colors in the yard softened, edges blurring slightly, as if the day itself were getting ready to rest. Grace stayed where she was, letting the swing move less and less, until it barely shifted at all. The oak tree remained in front of her, solid and patient. She realized she had never once worried about whether the tree was still useful. No one questioned its worth, because it no longer grew quickly. No one expected it to prove anything. Its presence alone felt enough. More than enough. The shade it gave, the way it held the soil in place, the quiet sense of continuity, it all happened without asking for attention. Grace thought about how different that felt from the way people often treated themselves. How easily value became tied to output, to recognition, to how visible or impressive one appeared to be. And how, as those things naturally shifted with time, a quiet fear could slip in, whispering that something essential had been lost. The oak tree didn't seem to believe that story. Its roots were invisible, buried deep beneath the surface. They weren't admired. They weren't photographed. But they were doing the real work. Holding, nourishing, keeping the whole structure steady through storms that never made headlines. Grace placed her feet more firmly on the porch floor and let the swing come to a stop. The stillness felt kind, not empty. She noticed how her breathing had slowed, how her chest rose and fell without effort. Her body at least seemed to understand something before her thoughts did. She remembered a time years ago when she had been afraid of slowing down. Afraid that if she stopped pushing, she might disappear. That if she wasn't reaching outward, she wouldn't matter anymore. But sitting there now, she didn't feel like she was fading. She felt grounded. The oak tree had weathered seasons Grace could barely remember. Droughts, heavy rains, winters that stripped it bare. And still it stood. Not because it tried harder each year, but because it had learned how to hold itself from the inside. Grace rested her hands on the arms of the swing. The wood was smooth from years of use, familiar, reliable. She thought about all the ways her own life had developed unseen strength through patience, through care, through simply staying when leaving would have been easier. Those things didn't show up on the surface, but they were there. The evening insects grew louder, then settled into a steady pattern. The world didn't rush her to come inside. It didn't demand reflection or resolution. It simply continued, allowing her to be part of it without effort. Grace's gaze drifted back to the oak tree one last time before the light faded completely. She didn't feel the need to compare herself to it. The image wasn't a lesson. It was a quiet companionship. A reminder that growth doesn't always look like expansion. Sometimes it looks like depth. She stood slowly, joints stiff but cooperative, and reached for the porch light. When it came on, the yard changed again, smaller, more contained. The oak tree was still there, partially lit, partially in shadow. Unbothered by the change, Grace paused, hands still on the switch. She didn't feel the urge to hold on to the moment. She didn't feel like she might lose something if she moved on. What she had noticed would stay with her the way certain understandings do not, as thoughts to repeat, but as a steadier way of standing. Inside the house, the evening waited quietly. Grace stepped in and closed the door behind her. The oak tree remained outside, rooted and patient, doing what it had always done. Not reaching for the sky anymore, not needing to be seen from far away, just holding the ground. And somehow, that felt like the truest kind of strength there was. May's hands were already dusted with flour before the rest of the city fully woke up. The bakery lights were on, soft and yellow, cutting through the early dark. The room smelled warm even before anything went into the oven. Yeast, sugar, something alive in the air. May stood at the stainless steel counter, folding dough over itself again and again, pressing, turning, feeling the texture change under her palms. She'd done this thousands of times. The motion didn't require thought anymore. Her hands knew when the dough needed more pressure, when it needed to rest. The rhythm was steady, almost quieting. Still, her mind drifted the way it often did in the early hours when the world felt bigger than her small corner of it. Some days she felt invisible, not in a dramatic way, just small. One bakery on one street, one woman waking up before dawn to make bread most people would eat without thinking. Customers came and went. Compliments were polite. Life moved on. Occasionally, when she scrolled her phone during breaks, she saw stories of expansion. Bigger shops, louder success, people announcing milestones with confidence and certainty. And a familiar thought would slip in uninvited. What difference does one small life really make? May folded the dough again. The surface smoothed slightly under her hands. She sprinkled a little flour on the counter, watching the fine grains scatter and settle. Each one caught the light for just a second before becoming indistinguishable from the rest. She remembered a line she'd once read years ago. Something about seeing the universe in a grain of sand. At the time, it had sounded poetic, but distant, like a nice idea meant for someone else's life. Standing there now, she wondered what it had really meant. The dough resisted her slightly, then yielded. She paused, resting her palms flat, feeling the warmth begin to build beneath the surface. The transformation was subtle, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. Nothing dramatic happened, just slow change guided by time and care. May moved the dough aside and reached for another bowl. As she poured ingredients together, the sound was soft and dry. Flour against metal. Quiet. Unimpressive. And yet, this was how mornings began for her. Not with headlines or announcements, but with these small, repetitive acts that quietly fed people she would never fully know. She thought about how often she judged herself by scale, by how big something looked from the outside, by how many people noticed, by whether her efforts echoed beyond her immediate reach. It was easy to feel insignificant when measured that way. But the bakery didn't operate on scale. It operated on attention. If she rushed, the bread suffered. If she was careless, the texture changed. Each small choice mattered, even if no one ever traced it back to her hands. May leaned against the counter for a moment, stretching her fingers. Her joints ached slightly. A familiar, honest ache. Proof of effort, even if the effort didn't come with applause. She looked at the flour still clinging to her skin, tiny white marks against warm brown. Each grain was almost nothing on its own, easy to wipe away, easy to overlook. But together they made the dough what it was. Without them, there was no bread. The thought landed gently, not as a lesson, but as a quiet recognition. She didn't need to be vast to be essential. She didn't need to be seen by everyone to be part of something whole. May returned to her work slower now, more present. She noticed the way the dough responded to her touch, the way patience made a difference. Outside, the city began to stir. A car passed. Somewhere nearby, a door opened and closed. Inside the bakery, time felt thicker, denser, like it was holding more than usual. She shaped the dough into loaves, and placed them carefully on trays. Each one slightly different, each one complete in its own way. She slid the trays onto the rack and stepped back, wiping her hands on her apron. For a moment, she stood still. She thought about how the world often taught people to look outward for proof of worth, to count impact in visible results, to believe that if something didn't scale, it didn't matter. But here she was in a quiet kitchen before dawn, surrounded by small things that would soon become nourishment. Not symbolic nourishment, real nourishment. Warm bread passed from hand to hand. The oven hummed softly as it heated. May rested her palm against the metal door, feeling the warmth through her skin. She closed her eyes for just a second. If the universe could exist inside something this small, she didn't need to be afraid of her size. She just needed to keep showing up. The oven clicked softly as it reached temperature, a small sound that meant things were moving forward. May didn't rush to load the trays. She let the dough rest a little longer, trusting the pause. In baking, waiting was part of the work. Not a delay, not a mistake. Just time doing what time does best. She washed her hands at the sink, watching the flour disappear down the drain. The water ran warm, steady. As she dried her hands, she noticed how quiet the bakery still was. No customers yet, no chatter, just the low hum of machines and the faint rhythm of her own breathing. There was a strange comfort in being alone with something simple. May leaned against the counter again, eyes moving slowly around the room. The shelves, the bowls stacked neatly, the apron hanging by the door. None of it was remarkable. None of it was meant to be. And yet it all belonged together, forming a small, complete world that made sense on its own terms. She thought again about scale, about how easily the mind learned to dismiss what was small, how often more was mistaken for better, bigger reach, bigger impact, bigger proof. It was a loud way of measuring a life, and not always a gentle one. The bakery didn't ask her to be loud. It asked her to be attentive. May opened the oven door. Warm air spilled into the room, wrapping around her face and arms. She slid the trays inside one by one, careful not to jostle them. The loaves sat quietly unassuming, as if unaware of what they were about to become. She closed the door and set the timer. The waiting began again. May poured herself a cup of tea and sat at the small table near the back. She didn't scroll her phone. She didn't fill the silence. She just sat there, letting the warmth of the cup seep into her hands. A thought passed through her mind, not sharp enough to interrupt the calm, but clear enough to notice maybe being small wasn't the same as being insignificant. Maybe small was simply a different way of being whole. She watched steam rise from the tea curl and disappear. Nothing about it tried to last longer than it needed to. Nothing about it tried to be more than it was. The timer rang softly. May stood, moved back to the oven, and opened the door. The smell of bread filled the bakery, rich and grounding. She pulled the trays out and set them on the cooling rack. The loaves were golden now, firm on the outside, still settling inside. They made quiet cracking sounds as they cooled, releasing heat. May smiled. Each loaf held countless grains of flour. Each grain had disappeared into something larger without losing its role. Not erased, not wasted, just included. She thought about how people often feared being swallowed by the whole, afraid of disappearing, afraid of not standing out. But maybe there was another way to belong, one that didn't require shrinking or shouting. The bread didn't need to announce itself. It didn't need to explain its worth. It would be broken, shared, eaten. It would do exactly what it was meant to do. May cleaned the counter slowly, methodically. The motions felt easier, now less burdened by comparison. She wasn't suddenly free of doubt. She knew it would return as doubts tend to do. But it didn't feel like the final word anymore. Outside, the street began to wake up. Footsteps passed. A car door closed. Someone laughed briefly, then moved on. The world was expanding into its day. May placed the loaves in the display case and adjusted the labels. She stepped back and looked at them, not with pride exactly, but with quiet acknowledgement. This mattered. Not because it was large, but because it was real. She wiped her hands on her apron and stood still for a moment longer. The universe didn't require her to be vast. It didn't require her to be everywhere. It only asked her to be here. And in that small, warm bakery, surrounded by ordinary things, she felt something settle into place. Not certainty, not accomplishment, just a sense of belonging that didn't depend on size, like a grain of sand, holding more than it seemed. There are moments when Henry feels like he's being held in place, not by a specific event and not by anyone else. Just a familiar feeling like sitting in a room where the door is always behind you. You know it's there. You may have even opened it before. But tonight you're still sitting as if an invisible thread is keeping you tied to that familiar chair. Henry is 58, retired for a few years now. His house has been quieter since the children moved out. That evening, he sits in the rocking chair on the front porch. The wood creaks softly with each gentle sway. A light breeze carries the scent of dry leaves and damp grass. Nothing is unusual. Everything feels like many other evenings before. He rests his hands on the armrests, fingers loosely intertwined. Not gripping, not fully letting go. A posture so familiar, it feels like his body learned it long ago. Henry looks out into the darkness beyond the yard. A distant streetlight is bright enough to outline the trees, but not enough to reveal details. The darkness isn't threatening. It's just there. A small sound comes from inside the house, the refrigerator kicking on, then falling quiet again. Henry stays seated. Not because there's anything he needs to watch over, just because he's used to sitting like this. Years ago, for a long time, he learned how to always be ready. Listening, watching, staying still. When a habit once helped, it became instinct. And instincts rarely disappear on their own, even when circumstances change. He rocks the chair one more time. The wood creaks again. The steady sound is almost soothing. Henry notices he's waiting for something to happen, but he doesn't know what that something is. There's no specific danger, no problem to solve. Just a sense that he should be here, should stay alert, should be ready. Some prisons don't need high walls, they don't need bars. They exist through habit, through staying in the same place, the same posture, the same reactions, even when the door has been open for a long time. No one locked it. But no one reminded you that you're allowed to stand up. Henry glances toward the front door. The white wooden door is slightly ajar. Not locked. Just a few steps and he could go inside, turn off the porch light, and rest. The thought appears clearly. Then, drifts away. He remains seated, not because he doesn't know he can leave, but because a part of him has grown used to staying with vigilance, staying with the feeling that something is not finished, staying with the idea that if he looks away, something might happen. The wind moves the branches gently. A dry leaf falls onto the porch with a soft sound. Henry turns his head out of reflex, then pauses when he realizes there's nothing to respond to. A very small moment, but enough for him to notice he did that out of habit. Not because of danger, just because his body learned to react that way. He exhales, a little longer than before. Not a sigh, just a fuller breath leaving his body. The rocking chair comes to a stop. The wood goes quiet. In that stillness, Henry feels something unexpected. No one is guarding him. There's no lock, no rule requiring him to stay here another minute. And at the same time, another feeling arises, not quite relief, but uncertainty. If he doesn't sit here anymore, then what does he do? When a habit has lasted long enough, letting go isn't just about opening a door. It's about stepping into an undefined space. Henry places one foot down onto the porch floor, noticing the coolness through the sole of his shoe. He doesn't stand up yet. He just leaves his foot there like a small test. Nothing happens. No alarm. No consequence. If you're listening and you recognize this habit of staying in an old state simply because it's familiar, that's okay. You're not imprisoned. You're just doing something you once learned very well. The question isn't, how do I escape? The question is, have you noticed that the door is already open? Henry keeps his foot resting on the porch floor a little longer. He doesn't lift it right away. He just leaves it there as if his body is getting used to the idea that it can change position. The rocking chair stands still behind him, now no pulling, no holding. The breeze moves through the porch cool and steady, carrying no warning signals at all. He realizes something very simple all this time. No one has been guarding him. He's the one who kept sitting in that spot, repeating the same reaction, the same state of readiness, even when there was nothing left to protect against. And this realization doesn't make him sad. It just makes things clearer. Henry stands up. Not quickly, not with resolve. He stands the way someone stands after sitting for a long time, slow, a little cautious. The chair makes a faint sound as his weight leaves it, then goes quiet. He looks back at it for a second. It's still there, available for another time. Just not now. He takes one step toward the door, then another. The distance from the chair to the front door turns out to be shorter than he thought. Just a few steps. No clear boundary. No line separating being held from being free. Just a series of small movements he hadn't really noticed before. Henry opens the door. The hinge makes a soft sound. A a familiar noise from a house at rest. He steps inside and closes the door behind him, not to lock himself in, but to keep the night air outside. Inside, the light is warm and gentle. This space is familiar too and safe, but in a different way, less tense. He stands still in the living room for a moment, unsure what to do next. And then he realizes he doesn't need to do anything at all. Not every moment has to be filled with action. Some moments only need permission to exist. Henry turns off the living room light. The brightness fades, not abruptly, just enough to soften everything. He walks toward the bedroom. Each step unhurried, not because he's tired, but because there's no longer a need to rush. His body seems to be learning a new rhythm, the rhythm of someone who doesn't have to keep watch. When he lies down, Henry doesn't think about tomorrow. He doesn't think about the past. He doesn't replay what he should have done differently. He just feels the mattress supporting his back, feels the breath moving in and out. Out no longer caught in his chest the way it was before. A thought passes through, what if something happens? It arrives quickly like an old reflex. And then it leaves just as quickly. Not because he argues with it, but because no one feeds it anymore. No habit stands up alongside it. Henry understands something now. Freedom in this moment isn't about doing something new. It's about stopping something old, about no longer sitting in a room where the door has already been open, about letting go of a position that's no longer needed. And it doesn't require great effort. It only requires noticing and allowing yourself to shift. If you're listening and you recognize that you're also in some kind of open cell, a familiar state and an old reaction, a loop of thinking that no longer serves you, then tonight you don't need to break down any doors. You don't need to run anywhere. You only need to notice that you're not locked in. You can stand up anytime, or you can sit a little longer if you want. Freedom doesn't rush you. It simply waits for you to notice it's been there all along. Henry's breathing slows. The space between his thoughts stretches out. There's no single moment marking a shift, no bell ringing, just a body slowly understanding that it's allowed to rest. If you fall asleep at some point while listening to this story, that's perfectly fine. You're not missing anything. The door doesn't close when your eyes do. It stays there open, quiet, undemanding. And if you're still awake, there's nothing else you need to do. Just stay still. Breathe out once more and let the old habit fade when nothing is feeding it anymore. Tonight, no one is holding you captive. There is only a place safe enough for you to stop being on guard and rest. There's a strange kind of anxiety that doesn't need proof. It only needs space. A free afternoon, a wide patch of sky, and a mind that's used to turning everything into a sign. Jason knows this kind of anxiety. It's like looking up at clouds and suddenly seeing something frightening. You flinch as if it's real, even though you know clouds are just clouds. Jason is 23, a community college student working part-time while taking classes. That afternoon, after a long day of lectures, he walks across the grassy area behind campus. The weather isn't especially nice or bad, just a wide sky with clouds drifting slowly by. A light breeze moves through the trees, their branches swaying gently. Everything feels comfortably ordinary. Jason plans to head straight to the parking lot, but his feet stop on the grass almost by habit. A few people are reading, a few small groups are talking quietly, and most of the space is calm. He finds a spot a little farther away, sits down and leans back against his backpack. Not because he wants to think, just because his body needs a pause. He tilts his face toward the sky. The clouds are thicker today, white and gray, layers stacked together, sliding past the sun and softening the light. Jason exhales. His shoulders drop slightly. Just looking up slows something inside him, as if his mind is allowed to step away from screens and constant notifications. Then, out of habit, his mind starts to draw. A long cloud turns into teeth. A darker edge becomes an eye. A gap between clouds becomes an open mouth. Jason feels himself tense without knowing why. He knows it's only clouds, but his body reacts as if something is staring back. He lets out a small laugh. Not a happy one, just the kind that comes when you realize your own mind has played a trick on you. He used to play this game as a kid, lying on the ground and guessing shapes in the sky. Back then, it was fun. Now it isn't. Now his mind doesn't look for rabbits or boats. It looks for signs, for warnings, for the worst-case scenario. His phone vibrates lightly in his pocket. Jason doesn't pull it out right away. He assumes it's an email from school or a work app. That small vibration is enough to spark a chain of thoughts. What if it's bad news? What if they change the schedule? What if I forgot to turn something in? What if I'm falling behind again? The feeling doesn't crash down like a storm. It's more like another cloud drifting in, dimming everything just a bit. Jason keeps looking at the sky, but now it feels like a screen, and the clouds feel like lines of text he doesn't want to read. He exhales again, slower this time. Not as an exercise, just the natural response of someone trying not to be pulled away. And in that moment, he notices something simple. The cloud that looked like teeth a moment ago is gone. It's changed shape. It's broken apart. Without him doing anything, without him arguing with it or telling himself it isn't scary. It changed because that's what clouds do. Jason keeps watching. The frightening shapes his mind just created change too. Not because he's forcing himself to think positively, but because the base of it all, the clouds are always moving. When the base keeps moving, the images can't stay fixed. He feels something loosen in his chest, just a little. Like realizing that what scared you doesn't have claws or teeth, only a temporary shape made by light and angle. And if that's true, then maybe many things in his mind are like that too. The monsters of the future, the signs that he'll fail, the proof that he isn't enough. Maybe they're just clouds passing through a tired sky. Jason finally takes out his phone, not to chase the worry, just to look. A simple notification, a reminder about his weekend work shift. No bad news, no disaster, just an ordinary message. He turns off the screen and slips the phone back into his pocket. He realizes he's done something rare. He looked at reality instead of imagination. He lifts his face to the sky again. This time he tries not to name the shapes. Not that's a monster. Not that's a sign. Just clouds. White, gray, moving, and a light breeze. If you're listening and you recognize this habit of looking at the sky in your mind and seeing only frightening shapes, that's okay. The human mind does this to protect itself. It wants to predict danger. But sometimes it predicts things that aren't real, simply because it's used to predicting. Jason stays there, eyes open. But his body has slowed. No big answers appear, just a small realization some things that look like monsters are really just clouds passing by. Jason stays there longer than he expects. Not because anything special is happening, but because nothing needs to happen. The grass feels soft beneath his back. His backpack just high enough to keep his neck comfortable. Above him, the sky continues doing the only thing it knows how to do, drifting. A thin cloud peels away from a larger one, stretching out like a loose thread. Then the thread breaks and dissolves into the pale blue behind it. Jason watches for a moment, then stops. Not because he's bored, but because there's no need to keep watching. When you don't try to hold on, things pass very quickly on their own. There are still thoughts in his mind. That doesn't change right away. But they arrive more slowly now. They don't crowd in. They don't demand to be solved immediately. Like clouds, they appear, shift shape, and move along. And Jason notices something that feels new. He doesn't have to believe every image his mind creates. A memory comes up how he once worried for an entire week about an exam, only to realize later that the test itself took one morning and passed much faster than all the sleepless nights before it. That memory behaves like a cloud too. It shows up, stirs a feeling, then softens when he doesn't cling to it. The breeze grows a little cooler. Jason zips his jacket halfway up, not because he's cold, but because it feels comforting. The sounds around him stay steady. Faint voices in the distance, footsteps on the path. A bird cutting briefly through the quiet. Nothing is loud enough to pull him out of this space. He closes his eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, just to rest. With his eyes closed, the clouds disappear, but the sense of drifting remains, as if the sky has moved inside him. When he opens his eyes again, the clouds have shifted. The shapes from earlier are gone. Not because he chased them away, but because time did what it always does. Jason realizes his worries work the same way. When he stares at them, they grow bigger, sharper, with teeth and eyes. When he gives them space, they fade and dissolve. Not always quickly, but always with movement. His phone stays quiet in his pocket. No vibration, no glow. Jason doesn't check it. Not out of discipline, but because there's no urge to. This open space, this sky, feels like enough for now. If there's any kind of lesson here, it's a very gentle one. Not stop worrying, not think positive. Just this: maybe you're looking at clouds and calling them monsters. And if so, you might try looking a little longer, giving them a bit more time and seeing how they change on their own. Jason gets up when his back starts to feel stiff, slowly, without regret. The grass is still there. The sky is still there. It doesn't need him to watch over it. He slips his backpack onto his shoulders, feeling the familiar weight, but it doesn't feel as heavy as before, maybe because something inside him is lighter. On his way to the parking lot, he looks up one more time. The clouds are thinner now. More light comes through. No frightening shapes appear. But even if they did, he knows they would pass. If you're listening and your eyes are starting to feel heavy, let them be heavy. You don't need to stay awake to understand anything. Clouds don't need to be understood. They only need to be seen and left alone. And if you fall asleep while the clouds are still drifting, that's perfectly fine. The sky doesn't disappear when you close your eyes. It just keeps opening wider, quiet, doing what it does best. Listen for a little while, and then let all the shapes dissolve. Some thoughts start out very small. So small that if you're not paying attention, you might not even notice when they first appear. But if you keep holding them, keep turning them over in your mind, they begin to grow. Not because they're true, but because you've given them too much time and attention. Priya is 28 years old. She works as a data analyst. Her job revolves around numbers, charts, streams of information constantly moving across a screen. That evening, she's sitting on her usual train ride home. The city slides past the window lights, stretching into long streaks. She's wearing noise-canceling headphones, but no music is playing. She just wants things to be a little quieter. In Priya's hand is her phone. The screen is off, but her mind isn't. An email from earlier that afternoon, her reply. A response from a coworker, nothing serious. No criticism, no clear consequences. And yet, in her head, the story keeps replaying, each time with a new detail added. I should have explained that more clearly. What if they think I'm unsure? Maybe I missed something. Each thought arrives small, like the very first snowflake landing in your palm. But Priya doesn't let it melt. She turns it over, thinks more, analyzes more. And before she realizes it, that tiny flake is no longer just a speck. The train stops at a station. Some people get on, others step off. Priya stays seated. She adjusts her scarf, pulling it closer around her neck, even though the car isn't cold. A familiar motion, almost comforting. For a brief moment, she notices her shoulders are a little tense. Not painful, just tight. She lets them drop slowly. No one tells her to. Her body has just been holding that position long enough. As her shoulders lower, her breath deepens slightly. And in that small opening, Priya notices something her thoughts didn't start out big. They became big because she kept rolling them, like a snowball. No one begins with a large one. You start with a tiny handful. But as you roll it across the ground, more snow sticks. The longer you roll, the heavier it becomes, until you can't even remember where it began. Priya looks out the window. A familiar grocery store. A diner with its lights already off. None of what she's seeing has anything to do with that email. But her eyes keep looking, and while they do, her mind loosens its grip on the old story. not because she's trying to forget, but because something else is being seen. She reaches up and adjusts her headphones, feeling the cool plastic under her fingers. The sensation is clear, immediate, real. For a few seconds, there are no charts, no sentences, just her hand and the object she's touching. And in that moment, the snowball in her mind doesn't grow any bigger. There's something Priya has started to notice on evenings like this. Negative thoughts rarely grow on their own. They need her participation. They need her to return to them. They need all the what-ifs and if-onlys. When she doesn't add more, they don't disappear right away, but they stop expanding. The train keeps moving, its rhythm steady, familiar. Her body slowly relaxes into that motion. She doesn't promise herself she'll never overthink again. She knows that isn't realistic. But maybe just for now, she doesn't need to keep rolling the snowball. Priya slips her phone into her bag, not to avoid it, just because she doesn't need to hold it anymore. Her hands rest on her thighs. She exhales slowly. A thought appears, "I'm still thinking." And right after it, a softer realization follows. "I'm noticing that I'm thinking." The difference is small, but that small bit of space makes the snowball feel lighter. If you're listening to this and recognize how your thoughts tend to grow in the evening, that's okay. You're not doing anything wrong. You've just been rolling the snowball without realizing it. And tonight, you might not need to push it any farther. Just pause for a moment, set your hands down, and let the snow melt in its own time. As the train nears her stop, Priya stands up out of habit. She isn't rushing. People move toward the doors, step by step. No pushing, no urgency. She follows the flow, letting her body remember the way. When the doors open, cooler air brushes her face, soft, almost gentle, like a reminder that the world outside is still there, no matter how busy her mind has been. Priya walks home from the station. She's taken this route hundreds of times. The same trees along the sidewalk, street lights spaced at regular intervals. Tonight, the yellow light pools onto the pavement in small circles. She moves from one patch of light to the next, not paying attention to whether she's walking fast or slow, just letting her steps find their own rhythm. The snowball in her mind is still there. It hasn't melted completely. The questions from earlier haven't disappeared. But as she walks, they stop growing. There's no new ground for them to pick up more snow. Just steady footsteps and breath moving in and out with that rhythm. Priya pauses at a familiar corner. A small shop is still open, its inside lights brighter than the street. She stands there for a moment, looking through the window. The shopkeeper is quietly restocking shelves, unhurried, in no rush to finish. The scene has nothing to do with her thoughts, but it's real enough to gently pull her attention away from the story in her head. Sometimes negative thoughts don't need to be defeated. They just need to be brought into the light. Like snow, when it stays in the shade, it can hold its shape for a long time. But when sunlight touches it, no one has to break it apart. It melts on its own, little by little. Priya keeps walking. When she reaches her apartment, she doesn't turn on the main lights. She lets the soft glow from the living room guide her in. She hangs up her coat, takes off her scarf, sets her bag down. Each small action feels like setting down another piece of the day. In the kitchen, she pours herself a glass of water. No ice, not too cold. The water touches her throat, cool enough to notice. She stands there taking small sips. For a few seconds, no thought continues. There's just the feeling of the water, the swallow, the brief pause between breaths. Priya notices this when she stops rolling her thoughts. They don't gain any more weight. They might still exist, but they no longer control her. They're like small bits of snow left on a sleeve, something that will melt once it meets warmth. She walks into the bedroom. She doesn't check her email again. She doesn't reread messages, not out of fear, just because right now it isn't necessary. She sits on the edge of the bed, takes off her headphones, and places them on the table. Another object set down. When she lies back, Priya doesn't try to coax herself into sleep. She simply lets her body be still. Her breathing slows. Her shoulders soften. The remaining thoughts drift by, not held onto, not pushed away. They come and they go, like thin clouds passing through the sky. If you're listening to this and still awake, that's okay. Maybe your snowball has grown a little bigger. Maybe it's been rolling all day. You don't need to melt it right now. You only need to stop rolling it further. The night doesn't ask you to find answers. The night only asks you to stop retelling the old story. If you fall asleep at some point, that's natural. If you don't, you're still in a safe place. Just a little warmth, a little light, and the snow will know how to melt on its own. Listen a little longer, or let sleep come whenever it's ready. There are some things in life that move farther away the more you try to grab them. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because their nature doesn't respond well to being chased. Peace is one of those things. The more you try to force yourself to feel calm, the louder your mind becomes. Olivia is 27 years old. She works as a barista at a small cafe. Her shifts start early and end earlier than most. That afternoon after work, she goes home, changes clothes, and sits out on the back porch. A string of lights hangs across the yard, glowing a soft yellow. The space is quiet, with only the sound of leaves brushing against each other as a light breeze passes through. Olivia brings a cup of tea with her. Not hot, not cold, just warm enough to hold comfortably. She sits down on the wooden chair, sets the cup on the small table in front of her, and lets out a long breath. Not because she's completely worn out, but because all day she's been holding things together. Orders crowds the coffee grinder, one request flowing into the next without pause. Now that everything is quiet, her mind refuses to be. Small thoughts begin to show up. Maybe I should ask to switch shifts. Am I even going in the right direction? Why does everyone else seem more settled? Each thought is small, but they keep coming one after another, like butterflies fluttering wildly inside her head. Olivia takes a sip of tea. It tastes faint. She sets the cup down, then absent-mindedly picks up her phone. The screen lights up. No new messages. She scrolls through a few apps without looking for anything specific, just searching for a sense of calm. But the more she scrolls, the more tangled her thoughts become. She turns the screen off and places the phone face down on the table. A butterfly drifts across the porch. Small, pale. It circles once or twice, then disappears into the darkness. Olivia watches it without much thought. But the image stays with her longer than the thoughts from a moment ago. When she was a child, she loved chasing butterflies. She would run after them, arms waving through the air, always believing that if she were just a little faster, she'd catch one. But the more she ran, the higher they flew. Eventually, she'd get tired and drop onto the grass, breathing hard. And then when she stopped chasing sometimes, a butterfly would land nearby, quietly, naturally. Olivia leans back in her chair. She realizes she's been doing the same thing with peace, chasing it by thinking more, analyzing more, comparing more. And each time she does, her mind only gets louder. Not because she's wrong, just because that approach doesn't work. She rests her hands on her thighs, holding nothing. The breeze moves again, making the string lights sway slightly. The light shifts with the wind, not still, but not rushed either. Olivia watches the glow for a while, not trying to focus, just watching. For a few minutes, she doesn't try to empty her mind. She simply doesn't chase any thoughts. When a thought appears, she notices it and lets it pass like the butterfly from earlier. No reaching out, no running after it. Some things only appear when we stop searching for them. Not because we give up, but because we stop doing the things that make them pull away. Peace is like that too. It doesn't like being pushed. It comes when it feels safe. Olivia closes her eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to feel the cool air on her face. A car passes somewhere in the distance. Dry leaves crunch under someone's steps nearby. The sounds are there, but none of them ask anything of her. She opens her eyes again. The butterfly doesn't return, but something inside her has shifted. Not complete calm, just less tension, like when you stop running and your heartbeat slowly finds its way back to normal. If you're listening to this and recognize how you've been chasing a feeling of calm, that's okay. Many people do. And many people grow tired from it. Maybe tonight you don't need to look for peace at all. Maybe you only need to sit still for a moment and let it come to you on its own. Olivia stays on the back porch a little longer. Not because she's waiting for anything to happen, but because there's no longer a reason to rush back inside. The tea has gone completely cold. She doesn't pick it up again. She just lets it sit there like a quiet sign that it's okay for things to pause for a while. The air feels cooler now. The string lights sway ever so slightly, their glow shifting slowly, unevenly, but not in a way that demands attention. Olivia lets her eyes rest on the dark yard in front of her. She isn't looking for anything in particular, just seeing what's already there. A small thought appears. I'm sitting here doing nothing. Right after it, another follows. Is this a waste of time? Olivia smiles very faintly, almost imperceptibly. She doesn't answer either thought. There's no need. They arrive and then they move on like two butterflies passing through the air. She adjusts her position, leaning more fully into the chair. The back of it is cool and solid. Her body is supported now, no need to hold herself upright. When she doesn't have to hold, her shoulders drop on their own. Her breathing slows, not by counting, just by following the ease of each exhale. Some evenings, what exhausts us isn't the work itself, but the constant reminder that we're supposed to be doing something. Supposed to relax. Supposed to be calm. Supposed to figure things out. But peace doesn't arrive on command. It shows up when no one is standing in front of it, hands outstretched, demanding it appear. Olivia looks down at her hands. They're open, not clenched. Her fingers curve naturally. And she notices something simple. When your hands are open, there's nothing to drop. There's just space to hold something if needed. And when nothing is needed, that space still feels okay. Another butterfly drifts into the circle of light. This one doesn't loop around much. It glides through slowly, then lands on the edge of the table for a few seconds. Olivia doesn't move. She doesn't hold her breath. She doesn't think she has to memorize the moment. She just watches. And then the butterfly lifts off again. The moment is brief, but it's enough for her to see something she'd only heard before. Some things only appear when we stop trying to pull them closer. Not because we don't care, but because we stop frightening them. Olivia closes her eyes. This time her eyelids feel a little heavier. She doesn't resist it. She also doesn't force herself to stay awake. She lets her body decide. If it wants to stay alert, that's fine. If it wants to rest, that's fine too. In that quiet space, thoughts still appear now and then. But they don't crowd in. They arrive one at a time, then fade. No story gets told from beginning to end. No loop grows strong enough to carry her away. If you're listening to this and your mind still feels a bit busy, that's okay. You don't need to push it away. Just don't run after it. Like butterflies, you don't have to sit perfectly still in a tense way. You only need to pause and let things unfold. Maybe tonight you don't need to look for peace. Maybe it's already very close. It just doesn't like being chased. When it's fully dark, Olivia stands up. She turns off the string lights and slides the porch door closed. There's no sense of loss. Just the feeling that this moment was enough. She moves back inside slowly, as if she doesn't want to disturb the calm that settled in. When she lies down, she doesn't think about tomorrow. She doesn't think about choices that need to be made. She lets her head rest on the pillow, lets the blanket cover her. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. If you fall asleep at some point while listening to this story, that's perfectly natural. If you haven't yet, you're still resting. There's no need to chase sleep. Just let it come to you. Listen a little longer, or fall asleep whenever you'd like. Some thoughts don't appear out of nowhere. They show up because they've traveled the same road too many times. Like tires rolling again and again over damp ground, carving a deep track. The next time the wheels don't have to decide, they slip right back into the old groove. thoughts work the same way. Not because we try to think them, but because we're used to them. Kevin is 37 years old. He's an accountant. This time of year is the busiest. That night, he's still at the office, even though the clock has passed 9. The fluorescent lights hum softly. The air conditioning blows steadily. On his desk sits a stack of papers, a few yellow sticky notes overlapping each other, like reminders that refuse to leave. Kevin stares at the computer screen. The numbers are stable. No major errors. Nothing about to fall apart. And yet his mind won't stop. Am I sure I checked everything? What if there's a small mistake? Someone else would probably finish this faster. The questions arrive in the same familiar order, like a car turning onto an old road without needing directions. He peels one sticky note off the screen, then sticks it right back where it was. A small, almost meaningless action. And yet it mirrors exactly what's happening in his head, going around the same loop, hoping this time it will feel different. Kevin stands up and pushes his chair under the desk. The chair legs scrape lightly against the floor. He walks into the hallway where the lighting is dimmer. The corridor is long and quiet, filled only with the sound of his own footsteps. Each step echoes more clearly because no one else is there. Sometimes staying in one place makes thoughts speed up. Like a wheel stuck in a rut, the more it spins, the deeper it sinks. Kevin stops at the window at the end of the hall. Outside is the parking lot's streetlights casting long streaks of light across the asphalt. Nothing remarkable, but it's different enough from the screen to pull him out of the loop for a few seconds. He notices something he's felt for a long time, but rarely named. His thoughts aren't creative. They're loyal to familiar paths. And every time he believes he has to travel those paths to be certain the tire tracks grow deeper. Kevin returns to his desk. He doesn't try to think differently. He doesn't tell himself to be more positive. He simply removes all the sticky notes from the screen, stacks them neatly, and chooses just one to place back on the corner of the desk. One next task. Not the entire road. The action doesn't make everything light instantly, but it creates a small pocket of space, like a wheel shifting just slightly out of its old groove. Even that small change feels different. The familiar scraping sound fades. The pull isn't as strong. Kevin sits down again. He works on the one task in front of him. He doesn't look ahead. He doesn't think about tomorrow. When a familiar thought returns, what if something's still missing? He notices it. Just notices. He doesn't argue with it. He doesn't follow it. And strangely, without being fed, the thought doesn't carry him as far as it usually does. Some grooves in the mind don't need to be destroyed. They just need to be seen. When we notice we're slipping into an old track, we gain another option. We don't always have to turn sharply. Sometimes all it takes is easing the wheel a little. Kevin saves the file. He stands up and turns off the monitor. The room feels less harsh without the glow. The space hasn't changed, but something in him has. Not because everything is perfect, but because he's no longer circling the same rut. If you're listening to this and recognize how easily you get caught in familiar thoughts, that's okay. The brain prefers known paths. They use less energy. But tonight, maybe you don't need to go far. Maybe it's enough to notice the old tire tracks and allow yourself to slow down just a little. Kevin leaves the office when the parking lot is much emptier. Many of the fluorescent lights in the building have been turned off. The long hallways feel quieter now, as if the space itself is slowing down after a long day. When he steps outside, cooler air touches his face, carrying the smell of wet pavement and trees after the afternoon rain. He opens his car door and sits in the driver's seat, but doesn't start the engine right away. Street lights blur softly across the windshield. Kevin rests both hands on the steering wheel, not gripping it, not letting go. Just resting there, feeling the familiar surface under his palms. A thought appears, one he knows well. Did I do enough? It isn't loud. It isn't urgent. It's just a question that's been riding with him for years. This time he doesn't answer it. Not because he has a better answer, just because right now it isn't necessary. He starts the car and pulls out. The road home is as familiar as the thoughts in his head. Turns he could take without a map. But tonight, when the road opens into 2 lanes, Kevin turns on his signal and moves into the other one. Not because of traffic, not because he needs to go faster, just because he can. The change is small. The wheel turns only slightly, but the feeling is different. He's no longer driving straight into the old tire tracks. There's no jolt, no disruption. Just another lane running alongside the first, quieter, a little less worn. Kevin realizes that thoughts can work the same way. We don't always need to force ourselves to think positively. We don't have to argue with familiar thoughts. Sometimes it's enough to stop following them for one more lap. Let them keep moving in their old lane while we travel a bit more slowly beside them. A red light. The car stops. Kevin exhales. The breath isn't much deeper than usual, just longer. In that moment, there are no numbers to balance. No spreadsheets opening in his mind. Just the distant hum of other engines and the familiar pause of an intersection. When the light turns green, he continues driving. The road grows darker, quieter. Fewer cars now. The old tire marks on the asphalt are still there. He can see them. But he doesn't have to drive directly into them. The car moves smoothly without being pulled off course. When he gets home, Kevin parks and turns off the engine. The house is dark and still. He goes inside without turning on the main lights, just enough glow to move through the living room. He sets his keys on the table, takes off his shoes, lines them up neatly by the door. Small, familiar actions, but tonight they don't feel rushed. He sits down on the sofa and leans back. The couch supports him without effort. He doesn't have to hold himself up. A few thoughts still drift through his mind, but they're no longer racing in a line, no wheels spinning too fast. If you're listening to this and noticing how often your mind travels the same old roads, that's okay. Those grooves aren't enemies. They're simply signs that you've been carrying a lot for a long time. But tonight you don't have to keep moving. You don't need to tear up the road. You don't need to find a new one. You only need to allow yourself to slow down. And if it feels right, turn the wheel just a little to the side. If you fall asleep at some point, that's completely natural. If you're still awake, you're still in a safe rhythm. The old road will be there tomorrow. But tonight, you don't need to take another lap. Wherever you are tonight, I'm grateful you chose to spend this quiet time here. If these stories help you rest, you're welcome to subscribe and return whenever you need a gentle place to land. And now, you don't need to do anything more. Let the night hold what you can't carry. And if sleep comes, let it come.